Working for the government is permissible, even in the United Kingdom. In non-Muslim lands, it is permissible as long as whichever department that you work in does not involve anything that is haram or harms Muslims. So, for example, a Muslim should not participate, for example, in defense contracts, right? Because the Ministry of Defense and the armed forces, that there is something that may lead you, when you work for them, to harm other human beings. We're not just talking about harming other Muslims, because that is haram, of course, but even harming a non-Muslim is haram. So we don't distinguish between the two. Haram, this is haram and that is haram. One is more severe than the other, but nevertheless it is haram. So when the government decides to go to war with someone, and it could be another non-Muslim nation, then you are called in, because you are contracted to them, to now aid them in their war effort, in killing other human beings. Why should a Muslim get himself involved in the killing of other human beings? For no reason. Just because his flag is a different color to your flag, or his skin color is a different color to your skin color, so we should now be patriotic and fight because your flag is a different color to their flag, or they said something about your country. So because neither side is willing to back down, we send 100,000 troops into battle, or 50,000 troops into battle. And then if you're working in one of the ancillary services, then your services are called upon to aid in the war effort of killing human beings. And some of that killing, of course, involves the killing of children and women, and blowing up and destroying of hospitals and utility services and the infrastructure of other countries, on the basis of what? Which moral high ground, really, in reality? So a Muslim should avoid working in any organization, whether government or non-governmental organization, that number one is haram in itself. So for example, you don't work for banks, breweries, pork manufacturers, anything that is haram in the Sharia, right? So for example, you wouldn't work for an insurance company, haram. You would not work for pension funds, haram, because the investment is primarily based upon usury and riba. You would not, for example, work as a barrister in a court of law, because there may be situations that you are forced into which may compromise your religion, and so on. Because if you are forced to compromise your deen, then you need to keep away from it. So there are those issues that are haram, and they are clear haram. And I've mentioned a handful of them: banks, breweries, pork farms, and so on. Insurance companies, haram. Likewise, that we do not work in those industries and those companies where there may be ta'awan ala al-ithmi wal-udwan. There may be cooperation and working together upon sin and transgression. So for example, you would not work for the War Office, or for the Ministry of Defense, or for any of the armed services or the armed forces. No matter how glamorous they make it look, ultimately, the goal of the armed forces is to be ready to kill. That's their goal. You're ready to kill for your nation. Not ready to kill for morality, or what is correct, or what is right, or what is wrong. You just kill. The ultimate aim. They are not peacemakers. The aim is that they are trained to kill. The armed forces of any nation are trained to kill. And if that nation or joining that army involves the killing of people based upon them belonging to a different country or a different nationality, or that their skin color is different to your skin color, or their flag is a different color to your flag, right? Because this is why most of the wars that took place, the wars of imperialism or colonialism that took place in the 20th century, both First and Second World War were colonial wars in reality, because the colonial powers were powerful and they fought against each other. The French, the Germans, the British, the Russians were all colonial powers, and they fought against each other in 2 world wars to preserve their colonial powers, primarily to disarm and to weaken the British imperial power around the world. Both of these wars were primarily because of that. And scapegoats were used and were killed and were slaughtered in the process of reaching their end goal, which was power. For what? Morality? Goodness? You think Britain entered the First World War because of any moral high ground? It was to protect their interests. Same as the Second World War. It was to protect their interests. Right? This is why they entered into these wars and they killed. So why would a Muslim get involved in anything like that? And if you say, well, that was the First World War, Second World War, but things haven't changed. Because these nations go to war because of their own interests. And those interests are sometimes not based upon, and predominantly and mostly, if not in all cases, not based upon any, righting wrongs, but in reality just for their own, personal nationalistic interests. So no, you should not, and a Muslim should not participate in any of that, because their track record is appalling. Their track record, and you only have to look in the last 100 years. You don't have to worry about the last 10,000 years, because that's bad enough as it is. Their track record for the last 100 years is a sufficient evidence that a Muslim should never participate in the armed struggles of these nations that slaughter and kill each other, these Western nations. And all you have to do is look at the Cold War that lasted 50 years, wherein over 30 to 50 million people died during the Cold War. They say the Cold War was a non-combatant war. It was a fully combatant war, but it was fought through proxy. In Angola, in Central America, in South America, in Vietnam, in North Korea, and other places. That these wars were fought as proxy wars between the two superpowers, and millions, tens of millions of people were killed. Right? That's just recent, because that only came to, the Cold War only officially came to an end in 1991 or 92, or 91 rather, maybe 89 when the wall came down, or 1990. So this is their track record. So why would any Muslim want to get involved in any of that? Do you think anything has changed? Look at the mess that they caused in Iraq. Look at the mess that they caused across the whole of the Middle East in their spread of so-called justice and Western democratic liberalism. Right? So this muscular liberalism that they talk about, which is basically imposing themselves upon others, a Muslim is not to get involved in that. Focus upon your religion. Practice your religion. Look for jobs that are halal. Anything that causes you doubt, stay away from it. Stay away from it. Because these armies are the biggest killers and murderers in the world. Their armies are the biggest of killers and murderers in the world, and that the world has ever seen in the history of humankind, as we know, to our knowledge, that no one has slaughtered and killed as many people as Europe has done in the last 100 years. In the history of mankind, we do not know this level of slaughtering that has taken place in the last 100 years at the hands of these imperialists, colonialists, and now we're living in the aftermath of that, and things haven't really changed. Maybe more tactical, but other than that, nothing's really changed. It is the same killing and slaughter, and it is cyclical. It continues happening, and it comes back again, and it comes back again, and you think maybe this is the last time, but it's never the last time, because bloodthirst does not come to an end with nations that are looking to expand and to protect their interests. So they will continue slaughtering and killing and threatening. So why would you want to even lift a piece of paper for them? Or to lift your pen, or to type anything into a keyboard that would aid them in their goals of killing other nations and destroying other infrastructures of other nations? Keep away from all of this, barakallahu feekum. But as for working for the government in other than that, like for example, you may work in the food agency or the trading standards, for example, or something like this, or even for the NHS, or working for social security or for social services. All of this is no problem, inshallah. Avoid that, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. Avoid that, because you're going to compromise yourself. You're going to dress like them, look like them, behave like them, give the bay'ah to them, pledge to them. Keep away from things that cause you doubt. And these things are no doubt. There is not any ambiguity in our minds that at the very least this is a very problematic area of employment. For obvious reasons. Yeah, it's clear. You have to enforce laws that you may not agree with, and then you are compromised. You are imprisoning people that may not deserve to be imprisoned because of a legal mechanism that has fallen apart, and it continues to fall apart. You may have to enforce something that is haram, and you may have to forbid something that is halal. Avoid it. Barakallah. There are plenty of jobs, better paid as well. Alhamdulillah. Allahu alam. I don't know the functions of any particular ministry or that particular ministry. I don't know its unique function, so I can't really comment on that. Anything that is doubtful, and you can see that there are clear loopholes and you'll be compromised in your religion, keep away. Barakallahu feekum. Just be a peaceful member of the society, giving da'wah, looking after your family, looking after your neighbors, helping those in need, educating yourself and educating others. That's all that's required of you. And get a decent job. Even if it be selling, coal for a fire burner in the marketplace. No problem. Yes, Akhi. Najas. I think we did cover it, or it is going to be covered. But Allahu A'lam, there doesn't seem to be much difference between the two, to be honest, from what I recall. Barakallahu feekum. From what I recall, there is not a difference in terms of its usage. You can work for, just like you could work for non-Muslim, arms of government that do not involve anything that is haram. Then likewise, you can work in Muslim governments, in ministries and so on, because it is even less likely to be haram there. But however, if there is a ministry in a particular Muslim country that commands you to shave your beard before you work for them, then you go and get another job. You don't criticize the government because of it publicly. You can advise them. You can say, well, I want to speak to the minister because I want to advise him. You can advise him and say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded the growing of the beard and so on, but you shouldn't ban it from the people in the ministry. Because there is one or two Muslim countries that command with the shaving of the beard before you can join a particular ministry. So it is haram to work in that ministry, not because the ministry is haram, because the conditions of entering the work with them is haram. So, but it is less likely that you're going to fall into any haram within a Muslim country at all. Less likely, in essence. Even in a Muslim army. Because Muslim armies don't go to war in general. All right? If you look at the last 100 years, Muslim armies don't generally go to war unless they're attacked. All right? So if a country is attacked, then it has a right to defend itself against attack. So they are not, by and large, Muslim countries are not aggressive forces. They do not carry out aggression. And if they do, it is minor skirmishes, or it is actually justified. If your territory is taken, then it is justified to fight for that territory. So it is a lot easier in Muslim countries. I'm not saying that it is the case that you should go and join them and join their armies, because it requires some research and some studying. What are the conditions? What are you going to do? Are you going to be given the freedom to pray? Are you going to, which in Muslim armies and forces, of course you are. Can you grow your beard? What are the conditions of employment? And so on. But you'll find that in Muslim armies and in Muslim ministries, in Muslim countries, by and large the affair is a lot easier. Because you're not the outsider, and you're not seen with suspicious eyes. You're not seen as the interloper or the one who is, you've come in and they're watching you all the time, like they do in certain Western countries. That they've always got one eye on you because you're the Muslim in the organization. So in Muslim countries you'll find that generally is not the case. And alhamdulillah, some Muslim countries are, or many Muslim countries, are very just in terms of their defense policy and their policy when it comes to war. So they will not go to war and they will not enter into war unless they go to the Muslim scholars. And therefore the war is justified from a moral stance, from a religious stance, from a defensive stance. And then after a lot of consideration, those scholars will give the ruling to the rulers that Islamically it is permissible to defend your borders or to prevent an attack against you. So, for example, the war between Saudi Arabia and Iraq in 1990, that was jihad in the path of Allah. Why? Because it was a defense of the Muslims of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia by an invasion of a communist Ba'athist army, of a Marxist-led army, at the head of them Saddam Hussein. So that was a justifiable war, and it is considered to be jihad. Right? Why? Because it is justified from the textual point of view, from the moral point of view, from the Islamic point of view. So you'll find that those rulers of that time, that they went to the scholars like Sheikh Abdul Aziz bin Baz and Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, and many of the scholars like Sheikh Abdul Muhsin and Sheikh Al-Fawzan and Sheikh Rabi' and others, that they spoke about the permissibility of fighting such a just war. And it is a just war. Walillahi alhamd. Barakallahu feekum. Sorry, akhi. What did I say? He said Rabi' here. Yeah, he said Rabi'. No. فهو الحارث بن الربيع الأنصاري. الله أعلم. That's what Sheikh Al-Fawzan said here. What is he saying there? Yeah. So in the other, in the English print, it mentions Rabi'i. Could be a printing error in Sheikh Al-Fawzan's or in the other one. But anyway,